But so last time we were talking about how spiritual people sometimes are a little bit too naive because they start from that place of wanting to believe. So, when there's a claim that's made that's, oh, there's ghosts or whatever, they just start off with that idea that, yeah, okay, instead of with the idea that, is this genuine though? There's a lot of, I think it would be well to not believe everything, but definitely come to it with skepticism. In this, I think that atheists have Christians beat when it comes to ghost content, because there's a lot of videos that are put up. It's kind of like the in thing to put up ghost videos. And so, Christians and other believing kinds of people, spiritual people, I should say, will go to these and just assume that they're real, whereas the atheists will start at it from the point of not buying it. And I think that we should probably learn that one from them. So 2 weeks ago, we were looking at the different ghost videos, just kind of debunking them and saying how there were a lot of other explanations besides ghosts, So that takes us to tonight. Are there ghosts and demons, and can things be haunted? So let's start off with a question. Have you ever experienced a situation or heard a believable story from someone that you do trust about things being haunted? So either a personal experience or someone you actually believe what they said told you something about it. Nothing? Well, let's say ghosts, demons, and hauntings. Let's widen the pool. Try to start with ghosts and hauntings before you get to demons, though. Okay, like something in the mirror? Oh, okay. Okay. Do they expect you to do something about it? Well, then they need to be paying rent if they're going to be staying there, Yeah. Okay, in the same house? Oh, okay. All right. Did you know anything about these people? Like, personally, not professionally. Sure. That might. Mm. That going around, I guess. Anybody else? Go ahead. Okay. People lie? Really? Huh. But that first story, though, you hopped by it real fast. Can you maybe, you said there was a woman with, and you just kind of skipped past it. Like a statue? Okay. Yeah, smart move. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Ghosts, demons, hauntings, anything like that? Definitely seems like there's some places that have more activity than other places. Okay. So two stories that I want to mention here. One was actually sent in as a question. I'll read it, but there was another person just since I came here, and I'm not going to share any names or anything just in case they don't want it going around. But there was one woman who was having some kind of manifestation in her house. I don't recall exactly what it was, but I seems to be going in my head something along the lines of there was like a fog or something, some kind of paranormal appearance that was either I want to see going along along the cabinets in our kitchen or going along the ceiling in the bedroom. I don't remember which. And there was kind of like a heaviness in the house. And she tried to call in different priests and pastors and whatnot to try and bless the house, and it didn't work, obviously. And then the other thing was sent to me as a question, and I'll just read it to you. My friend years ago told me her mom's old house was haunted. So me being me, I needed to see it. So we went, and she described this ghost to a T. The new homeowner described the ghost to a T without us telling her anything. Blew my mind because I never believed in that stuff until that day. And then I talked to her again today after figuring out who she is. She said it is still there. So I had to kind of get some clarity from this person as they were saying this. There was a person who lived in the house. They saw this, what they believed to be a ghost. And I'm going to read you the description of the ghost in just a moment. And then they sold the house. New owner said the same thing, described the ghost in the same terms. And I'll read it to you in a second. And then they talked to them again after this, just a few weeks before this was sent. So I guess that's probably like a month and a half ago, or maybe 3 months ago. I've been holding on to this because I knew we were going to talk about ghosts. And talking about how this ghost was still there. And this is the description. Top hat, older white man, beard. Both families describe the same, and the information on that is not listed when selling. So how does that work? Some kind of time warp, God giving them time to get it together, stuck between heaven and hell because of something they need to finish. I have to stop watching TV. So a lot of stuff going on there. And we'll try to kind of look at these things as we can. I think we're going to be able to answer most of both of those people's questions about the paranormal experiences in their house. I hope so. We'll see where we get to. So nowadays we live in a time where it's very common with the rise of the occult and cults that it's very common for people to believe in ghosts. Super duper common. But it's becoming less common for people to believe in a personal, saving God, Yahweh. They'll believe maybe in the idea of a God out there somewhere, kind of like the AA's being. You know, it's just kind of like filling your God, kind of like that. And that kind of surprises me because you'd think that if people were getting more into believing in ghosts and those kinds of things, they would believe in some kind of supreme ruler of the dead. I mean, doesn't that kind of follow? If there's dead people wandering around the earth, wouldn't you think that there'd be some kind of like supreme ruler over them? But, I mean, either way, maybe if you're thinking, like maybe a lot of people in the church think, well, thought more than think, but Christians are starting to believe in things like ghosts is what I'm trying to get at. So if you're part of the group that, grew up in church and don't really take much belief in ghosts, you might wonder, why believe in ghosts? What's in it for you? And there is the obvious horror element, which I think is extremely important to note. And the horror element is that ghosts can teach us things. Let me explain. In the story, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, there's the ghosts of Christmas past and Christmas present and Christmas future. And these kinds of ghosts are able to communicate things to the people who are still living, like what's his name, the guy in chains, change your ways or else you'll be in chains like me. His old partner. I forget his name, but you know the guy. What? Yeah. Not Bob Marley. That's the singer. But yeah, Marley, or if you watch the Muppets, it's Marley and Marley, Jacob Marley. But anyways, so there's the idea of ghosts being there as a not necessarily a bad presence to teach us things. Sometimes people see ghosts as scary things that are attacking and whatnot. But then another aspect of why people like to believe in the idea of ghosts is because besides the continuity of my lost loved ones, I still get to have them around. They'll still contact me by leaving me coins on the ground and stuff. Besides that, there's the whole living without regrets. Ghosts are a constant reminder to seize the day and make sure you don't leave anything that you want undone. With the whole being accountable for your life and get done what you can before you die. But let's talk about what the Bible says. Can I have some volunteers to look up some passages? You good? Okay. If you could look up Hebrews 9:27. One of you back there? Can you look up Ecclesiastes 9:5-6? And Gracie, can you look up 2 Corinthians 5:8? So what does the Bible have to say about ghosts? Surprisingly to me, and I say surprisingly because people believed in ghosts and spirits and whatnot for a long time. I would have thought that the Bible would have been more direct about ghosts, but it really isn't. But ghosts are mentioned maybe kind of in the Bible, just very rarely, and it's questionable. So maybe a good example of that would be in the book of Samuel, where King Saul has a seance, and Samuel comes up from the grave to talk to him, which leaves us with two options. Option A, it wasn't really Samuel, or option B, it was really Samuel. So, those are our only two options. If it was really Samuel, then in a way, you could say that was a ghost. In a way. If you define a ghost simply as a person who has died and is now communicating with you, if that's your definition of a ghost, then yes, the Bible has ghosts. If your definition of ghosts is more the pop culture definition of ghosts, these beings that are wandering around with unfinished tasks and turning your lights on and off and opening doors for whatever reason, if that's your definition of ghosts, then no, the Bible doesn't talk about ghosts. So it really just kind of depends how you're defining the word ghost. Now, the bigger question, I think, because the Bible doesn't say anything about marijuana either, does the Bible say anything to refute the idea of ghosts? Well, yes and no. Popular ghost theories, yes, it says something to refute those, but not necessarily the belief in all ghosts. So, Melissa, you read your passage first, Hebrews 9:27. I'll have you.
And just as it is appointed for people to die once, and after this, judgment.
For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun.
So that passage there in Ecclesiastes seems to be talking in pretty final terms, as the Hebrew passage in Hebrews does. And then 2 Corinthians
Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord.
So here in this passage, it seems like Paul is saying that any time that a person is not in their physical body, they are in heaven before the Lord. Something there. Obviously, the distinction could be made between the righteous and the wicked as far as not everybody goes to heaven. I understand that. But my point being, for us who are saved, it seems like Paul's only giving the option of either being in your body or being with the Lord in heaven. So obviously people who aren't saved don't have that same thing. Does that mean that they would be either in their body or roaming the earth? Well, I don't think so. It makes more sense to take the view of everything that's said in the Old Testament, that to be out of your body is to be in Sheol or death or hell, however you want to describe it. And so I really don't think that there's any basis for the popular ghost theories of people walking around the earth. So people aren't wandering around the earth. They don't have unfinished business, and they don't contact us. This is an important point I want to make, okay? Because a lot of times people have someone die, and they'll say, they are communicating with me, they leave me coins, or I saw a bird, and it is them letting me know that they're there. I'm sure you guys have heard lots of different variations of the same idea. I was listening to a song, I remember I was listening to the radio, and a song that we used to, whatever, came on, and I know it was them playing the song from here. Whatever. There's different ways, but it's basically the same idea, that they are contacting you. No. In fact, the Bible kind of seems to imply that it's impossible for them to contact you. For instance, in the story where Lazarus and the rich guy die, I call him the rich guy instead of the rich man, when they die, it says that the rich guy's in hell, and he's like super uncomfortable. And he's saying, if Lazarus could just like dip his finger in water and let it drip on my tongue, and he says, no, there's this chasm, and he says, okay, can I go back and warn them? And he seems to be implying that it wouldn't be possible for him to go back and warn those people who have not died yet. So with all that being said, I don't necessarily saying that there are no ghosts, but definitely not ghosts as we think about it today. And ghosts are often not even spirits of deceased people. The grand majority of times that people have contact with ghosts, it can easily be better explained by demons, and when pressed, they will respond that they're demons. They'll lie to you, but if you press them with prayer, they'll kind of, usually, as far as I'm aware, they will tell the truth. So there is no biblical evidence for ghosts wandering around the earth. However, you might say, my dear friend, my old chap, my old pal, what about the Mount of Transfiguration? Jesus is going up this hill with 3 of his disciples, and there are 3 dead guys that came and talked to him. Isn't that ghosts? And the same thing that I said about Samuel, we can kind of bring over here. In the case of Samuel, people can argue about whether or not it was really Samuel, although it appears to really have been Samuel. But in the case of the Mount of Transfiguration, you can't get around that. It really is the people. But keep in mind that these 3 people who came and saw Jesus, let me say it this way. Can you read Ecclesiastes? No, you're already in Ecclesiastes? Yeah, at 12:7. When we die, our body goes to the ground, our spirit goes to God. Let's look at what Ecclesiastes says here.
And the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it.
Thank you. So right there, you kind of have pretty final terms about what happens at death. So when we die, our body goes to the ground, our spirit goes to God, but what we can kind of wrap around here with the idea of the Mount of Transfiguration is these were not people who were wandering around the earth, right? They weren't just wandering out and then like, oh, Jesus, let's go ahead and make a stop over there. These were people that were obviously with the Lord, and heaven and earth met in that moment. This is a very important point because just before this story, where this happens there in Matthew chapter 16. Just before this story, Jesus makes a comment that some of you who are standing here will not taste death before you see my kingdom come. He makes that comment. Now, obviously, we know that the end has not come. So what was he talking about? This is what he was talking about. The beginning of the kingdom of heaven meeting earth. It starts here, and it also is in part in Acts chapter 1 or 2 or whatever, when the Spirit descends on the church. So this is the coming of the kingdom that he's talking about, how some people wouldn't die before, they wouldn't taste death before it came. So I really don't think we can look at the amount of transfiguration and say, yes, this is proof for ghosts. I think it's more proof that people in heaven, when God wishes it, can have contact with people on earth. Don't push that too far. And I think these are just three people who were obviously in heaven, and Jesus, being God, met with them on the Mount of Transfiguration. I wouldn't push this too far to say ghosts. Once again, it really depends on your definition of a ghost. Ghosts are real in the sense that that people have spirits, and when the spirit is not in the body, you could refer to it as a ghost. In that sense, since we haven't had the resurrection of the flesh yet, you could say that heaven is filled with ghosts. You could say that. That's kind of not really what people have in mind, though, when they talk about ghosts. So what about when Jesus is talking to doubting Thomas? He said, how would you like to be known as that? What's your name? Thomas? Wait, do you have any nicknames? No. But anyways, he's talking with him. I don't believe so. He's talking with him, and he says this. He says, look and touch. Ghosts don't have bodies. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, that's kind of the idea of what he says. So doesn't that mean that Jesus himself is saying that there are ghosts? Well, not really, because here's the thing. He never actually says that ghosts are real. He rather refers to what they are thinking. He's a ghost. Okay, all right, I'm a ghost. Okay, well, look and touch, and you can tell that I have a body, obviously not. And I mean, the same thing happens when he's walking on the water with the boat. They're like, it's a ghost. Like, yeah, well, I mean, I'm here. You just saw me a little while ago. Anyways, it seems more likely that Jesus is simply referencing a common belief. That seems much more likely. In fact, we have other biblical warrant for people doing this. Paul, in the book of 1 Corinthians, is talking about the resurrection from the dead. And he makes this comment. He says, if there is no resurrection from the dead, then why do people baptize on account of the dead? Is he saying we should baptize dead people? No. He's saying people do this because we're looking forward to a hope of resurrection. It's not him advocating the idea of baptizing the dead. So, okay, that's kind of the skinny on ghosts. What spirit beings are there then? Well, there is obviously God. There's obviously angels and demons. There's human spirits in either heaven or hell. Okay. So let's break that down. We know what God is. We know what human spirits are. And let's look at angels and demons. Angels, the Bible makes clear, are messengers of God. They are not people who have died. I don't know how many people have a kid or something that will die, and they'll say, heaven has gained another angel. We are lower than the angels now, but in the resurrection, we'll be higher than the angels. They are servants of that's all. They're messengers and servants of God. They're not something to be worshipped. They're not something to be desired to attain to. We're trying to be like Jesus, not like the angels. So, this wouldn't be a promotion. It would be more, if anything, more of a lateral move. That's not something we should be desiring anyways. You could say, my baby has died and gone to heaven. You could say that, but to say that they're turned into angels is just a little silly. We are different from angels. We're not the same. We're different beings. It's like comparing cats and dogs. So the Bible is absolutely clear, and I'm not going to waste time looking at the references on this, that demons are angels who rebelled, so they are the same category of thing. Demons can masquerade as angels of light. 2 Corinthians says that. So in other words, they can fool people with illusions. Okay. That makes sense, so especially if Satan is the father of lies. So let's kind of ask the question that's obviously hanging in the air there. Why don't they always go around as angels of light if they can appear as angels? Why don't they just do that all the time? I think that the question is a little bit silly, because I think that it's assuming that there is such a thing as alternate light, or what am I trying to say? basically that there's no such thing as real light, that all light is a illusion. And the reason why I said is because every sin eventually comes to light. Every single sin. Truth always reveals the lie, always. So no matter how good a demon is at, putting on a masquerade of an angel of light, that doesn't mean that he can do it all the time, because eventually he will be discovered, okay? So let's not get silly with that. And then second off, it never says that a demon becomes an angel of light. Rather, he can fool people into thinking he's an angel of light. It's a total difference there. So Satan is a demon. I know sometimes people think all kinds of crazy things about this. A lot of times people think that Satan, there's like this hierarchy. Don't know why I can't pronounce that. In hell, where like Satan is like sitting on a throne with his own crown, and then all the demons are like around him beating the people in hell or whatever, and he's just like, haha, yes, good job, Greg, And I can't really see the demonic having a very well-established hierarchy. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, Satan says we have to go over here, so we're going to have to do that now. I don't really see that that's really how the demonic works and operates. They more do chaotic kind of things. So Satan is a demon, but I wouldn't call him the Lord of the demons. But we could talk about some other day. Demons want to lie, steal, and destroy. That's all they're interested in doing. And so having fake things that will distract people is absolutely something in line with them, as far as, hauntings and possessions and those sorts of things. That's right up their creek. Why would they do that, is what a skeptic would say. Why would they waste their time like, ooh? Well, mostly it's to get people's attention off of God. Because if you can get people to focus on, things that aren't very important. I mean, think about the grand majority of church fights, right? Like, they're usually not about something important. They're just about, little piddly stuff. Because that's how Satan works. Like, he gets us to focus on things that don't really matter. And that's pretty much exactly the same thing the demons do, too. Like, when they do huntings and stuff, it's not something that, like, really matters, like flickering the lights on and off. I mean, it's not going to ruin your day. It's going to, and it'll make you trust Jesus less or get your attention off of Jesus, just like sickness does. But I don't think that, I just don't think we need to push it too far. However, demonic activity is not like you see on TV. Has anybody here seen the movie Exorcist? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. In the movie Exorcist, and I'm sure you guys have at least seen pictures, the girl who's possessed, she's got like, her skin looks all jacked up and her teeth are all, and her head spins around and, all kinds of crazy, stupid nonsense. That's not really what people look like when they're demon possessed. I mean, come on. I feel like we should know this, but for a lot of people, their knowledge of the demonic comes from Hollywood, which is kind of scary. But another thing that people do in Hollywood that people start to believe is demons are basically monsters. They've got these wings with claws, and they're all, And this is more reminiscent, I think, of that movie from the 80s, Gremlins, than it is of actual demons. I mean, there's no reason to assume that that's what demons are like. They will deceive people and try to encourage rebellion in any way that they can to God. Why do they do this? It's their nature. They're fallen, they're corrupted, they're sinful. Demons cannot repent. They cannot receive forgiveness. This is something that's not open to them. And they don't sit down in hell torturing people with whips. I mean, that's not what they do. Are you really itching to say something, Danny? You were waiting with that one, weren't you? So in seances, something appears, okay? I'm assuming nobody here has actually been to a seance, right? Have you ever been to a seance? No? Okay, all right. So in a seance, something does appear, and you can, talk to people who've been at seances, and they'll all say something similar. The question is, what is appearing at the seance? That's really the heart of the question. Now, judging from what we've looked at in the Bible, it is possible that it is a person. We see that in the case of 1 Samuel, with Samuel. And although that doesn't seem to be the regular occurrence, it is a possible occurrence. We are told not to have, not to try to contact the dead, but that doesn't mean that we can't actually contact the dead. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just means that we shouldn't. It could also be a demon pretending to be the person, like a demon will pretend to be an angel of light. Both things are possible. I will say that most often when people have contact with their lost loved ones, I have yet to see with my own eyes an experience where it actually was a lost loved one. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I'm just saying I've never seen it. Every time it's a demon that I'm aware of, and obviously I can't be at every single time and talk to every single person, read every single book, but from what I do know, I've never seen any actual human thing. And here's what the thing is, they knew things that only my loved one, because they were probably there. I mean, they have knowledge. You've been alive for, thousands and thousands of years. They were there. They saw. I don't think that's anything that should blow you away. And these loved ones, when pressed, always tell the truth when confronted with the power of Jesus. For instance, if you command them to tell you who they are in the name of Jesus, lo and behold, they're not actually the loved one. Who would have guessed? I will say that there is a very big danger that I see Christians doing. Basically, they do this. I walk in the power and authority of Jesus. Therefore, I'm going to do something stupid, and God's going to have to bail me out. I'll go to a seance because, hey, I can. I'm strong enough. I know what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Well, that's a real good idea. Smart thinking there. I can go to a altar here in Mexico. It's not going to hurt our little team because we're here on a mission trip to God. How could something bad possibly happen? And lo and behold, something bad happened. Oh, I didn't see that one coming. Oh, surprise. It's pretty obvious. You don't go messing with this kind of stuff just to be stupid. If you find yourself in this situation, that's different. But if you go out of your way to put yourself into the situation, that's just being stupid. It's not walking in the power and authority of Jesus. It's being stupid. Jude and 2 Peter both talk about the way these different people blaspheming the things that they don't know, and we don't have time to look at it, but just not a good idea. And what I've found is people will walk in disobedience and then claim the authority. And I don't just mean... I'm not just talking about people being in conflict with in the church and then trying to walk in authority. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where people will... What's a good example? Well, actually, the example I just gave, where people will go to a seance like God told them not to do, and then say, I'm walking in the authority of God. And it's like, well, okay, so you're actually walking in disobedience is what you're doing. And I feel like a lot of times Christians don't see that they're putting the Lord, their God, to the test when they do that. What you're doing is, God has to bail me out because I put myself in a bad situation. That's putting the Lord, your God, to that's exactly the definition of that. Really, don't do such stupid stuff. Under no circumstance should a Christian play with these things to test God. That's just stupid. So there was a woman, I've told you this story numerous times, but it's super important for this discussion. There was a woman who thought that she knew the mind of demons. She thought that she knew what demons were doing, and that they didn't know that she knew. So one time I was leading worship, and afterwards she says, I knew you were going to do that because I saw the demons. They told you to do. They made you do that. And I was like, that's an interesting idea. How do you know that they aren't fooling you? Well, because that they don't know that I know. And I said, okay, how do you know that they don't know that you know? How do you know that they aren't telling you what they want you to know? Did you ever think about that? Like, you could be misled. Like, what are you basing it off? And she goes, and you could see the light come into her eyes. She figured it out. She's all, well, okay, so that's a good point. I'll have to think about that. I was like, anyways, when you're led by the Spirit, you don't have to be concerned. But the thing you do have to watch out for is the demonic will always try to get you to second guess yourself when you're walking in the Spirit. I can already imagine Satan talking to Jesus. Well, what are you doing out here in the desert? That was a big mistake, dummy. Aren't you hungry? And then after Jesus won, well, okay, all right, But Satan will always do that. He has no problem blaspheming God. He has no problem making fun of God's children and attacking them. He has no problem with that. So, moving on from there, the problem that I also raised the question with that woman, what are you basing your trust with what you hear and see that is true account? See, we base our beliefs on the Bible. If somebody says something, if demons claim something, we have a Bible to compare it to, right? So, for instance, here's a really good example. There was somebody I was talking to that had gone to, I believe it was a seance or something, and they were talking about the way that at this seance, this dead relative told them about how they, well, how did he say it? That there is no such thing as heaven. After you die, everybody just goes and it's real peaceful and all this different stuff. And it was like, how convenient. It's exactly against what the Bible says. Did you address that? Oh, no, because it was my uncle or whoever it was. And I was just thinking, why do you believe it was your uncle? Because they looked like your uncle? Anyways, these kinds of things, we have the Bible that we can depend on and kind of push back on. And those kinds of proofs aren't the final proof. Moving on from there, can things be haunted, though? Ghosts, demons, what about hauntings? I think that this kind of goes back to the text, and I'll try to kind of go back and answer them too, but most hauntings and ghost activity can be easily explained, most of them. I would say 99% of the content that you see is fake. There's going to be tricks of the camera, hoax, air currents, fishing line, all these different things that are usually not hauntings. What you see on the movies is almost 100% fake. I will say that for certain. However, that doesn't mean that all of it is. So we have to ask the question, what about the stuff that is genuine? Well, in the case of that question that was asked, is it possible? Well, I'm not saying that this is what happened. Is it possible that the woman who sold the house to the new people told them and described this ghost there, and they had an active imagination, and they also thought that they saw somebody because it was already described to them? Is that possible? Right? When they sold the house, is it possible that they talked to the other people? Yeah, it's possible. I don't think that's what happened in this case, but it's possible. I think it's also possible that the person maybe left a picture or drew a picture or something like that, and the new owner found it. I think that's possible. And I think that nowadays there's a big push for ghost houses. Everyone wants to have a ghost house and have like a real popular video about their ghost house. And these kinds of things are possible. I don't think that's what happened in this case, though. And once again, people believe because they're believers, approach everything like this with skepticism as far as hauntings. However, that doesn't mean that all of it is fake. So let's talk about the real. Demons will do more when you believe and let them do more. I don't know how this works, but that is how it works. A demon, for instance, if you believe that a demon can and is haunting your wardrobe, why not? There's more likelihood that it will. I don't know how this works, but basically the idea is the more power you give to a demon, the more power they'll have. I don't know. It's kind of like the whole believing in Santa, and that gives his sleigh power to fly. It's kind of the same idea. I don't know how it works. Really, I don't. But time and time again, I've seen this proven where when people believe something about the demons, it allows them to have that extra, umph in the household. I don't know what the overlap is between a person's belief and a demon's power, but there is an overlap of some sort. But we'll look at that probably some other day. Then there's the whole idea, Jesus talks about a person, when a demon is cast out, that they wander around looking for a place to rest, waterless places. They can't find one, so they say, hey, I'm just going to go back to my house, and they go back to the person. Now, if something is not living there and the house is in order, the demon takes along his friends and goes and inhabits the place. So is it possible that this also would happen to things or places? Maybe. The Bible doesn't say that it can't happen as far as haunting. Basically what the question is, can only animals and people be possessed, or can other things be possessed too? That's the question. And I don't see any biblical basis for doubting that things can be haunted. I would say it's not haunted by ghosts, but that doesn't mean that it's not haunted. Some things are just here's a good example. Have you ever touched a Ouija board, not on purpose, just an accident, that people have used repeatedly? You know what I mean? It just kind of feels off. Have you ever been in a witch's house? Okay. Well, when you go into places like this, you just kind of feel a heavy oppressiveness. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like a place you'd want to hang out at. You know what I mean? This is why it always surprises me how diehard Wiccans will, stand for their beliefs, because you'd think you'd want to be free of that. But anyways, I'm off topic here. Moral of the story being, those places felt haunted, oppressed. Now, obviously, I'm not saying ghost oppressed, but I can see demons kind of focusing on some places over other places. You ever heard of a cop bar? Well, who's to say there aren't demon houses? I mean, I don't know. There's nothing that says that they can't. Evidently, there's some places that they like hanging out more than others. A good example of this is actually in the Gospels, where there's a man who's possessed, and he starts hanging out at the cemetery. Well, he didn't live there before he was possessed, but he just starts hanging out there. So it seems like there's times when demon activity will be more prevalent in a certain spot. I don't really understand how that works, but let's move on. Hollywood informs most people knowledge of the supernatural. I think that's a huge mistake, but there's the way it is. Their job is to entertain, not to say what is. And I think we'd do wise to do that. A lot of times, my biggest problem that I have with Christians nowadays is that when I'm talking to them, Christians, the Bible is no longer a source of authority. Christians, 90% of the arguments that I have with Christians is biblical based. They'll be arguing like for ghosts and this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, let's look at the Bible. Well, the Bible doesn't really, well, yeah, it kind of does though. Anyways, so, if I could say the biggest root of all church problems that I've seen over the past 5 years, I will say 100% of them is because people not reading their Bibles. Legitimately, 100%. Anyways, some places seem to have more demonic activity than others. Demons will take what people will allow them to have. I already mentioned that. Some activities are more prone to bring demonic activity. For instance, and people don't connect the dots with this, when you think of demonic activity in your household, what do you think of? You think of like Ouija boards and spells and those kinds of things, right? But I've actually seen a lot of times where there's an issue of rebellion to authority. And this is based off that 1 Samuel, where before Samuel dies, he tells Saul, and this might actually be part of Saul's rationale for going to the Witch of Endor, is Samuel tells him to obey is better than sacrifice, and he says, how does he word it? Rebellion is as of the sin of witchcraft. They're equals. So to rebel against authority and to practice witchcraft, they're the same category of thing. And why this is important is because there'll be times when Christians will be in such a rush to try and help, and I do use that term very loosely, help their kids, that they will let their kids move back in when their kids are living in rebellion of God. And then they think that it's not going to affect their household, and it's like, yeah, it's not just demonic movies that you're having in your house and Ouija boards. If you've got a child that is living in rebellion to God and they move in with you, you're letting that in your house. Like, that's the same thing. It's not like a different category. Moving on from there, though. Do all demons flee if you but say the name Jesus? No. I don't know where this idea got started, but basically it says that you are in a situation, all you do is just say the name Jesus, and that solves all the problem. No. We actually have biblical basis that talks against this. When we say there's power in the name, we don't mean there's power in the name Jesus. We mean in the name of Jesus, which is is in the name of, which is a way of saying under something's authority. There's power in the authority of Jesus, not just in saying the name Jesus. And this is important because Acts gives us an example where people are trying to cast out demons, and we see that if your walk is not sincere, casting out a demon in the name of Jesus does nothing. They were saying, according to the Jesus that Paul preaches, or Peter, I don't forget which, and the demon didn't listen because there was nothing there to back that up. Second example in the Bible that we see is if you are not staying in prayer. There's a demon that the disciples are trying to do something with, nothing will happen, and Jesus says, this is not going to happen unless through prayer and fasting. So, obviously there's two examples of just saying Jesus is not going to fix it. The third one is if you are arrogant instead of submissive. When someone is trying to attack the demonic without being under submission of Christ. So you're living in sin, you're doing all these things, and Christ is not your head, and then you're trying to go and attack these. A great example of this was actually in a book by Walter Martin. See if I can remember the story. So there were these Christians who brought a Bible to a Ouija board, and they were talking to the Ouija board, asking it questions and stuff, and which, a stupid idea, guys, real stupid idea. And so then they start being attacked by this demon, and he starts, hitting them and stuff, so they throw their Bible at the board, and it throws the Bible right back at them, and, they walked out with some bruises. Yeah, that's pretty stupid. It's just looking for stupid. Anyways, so no, you can't just go and put yourself in a bad situation and expect because you said the name Jesus that's going to fix all the problems. That's like walking in front of traffic and being like, well, Jesus, you're still going to get hit by a car. Sometimes I think people want to believe, and so because they want to believe, they hold God to things that he never said. And then they get disappointed that he didn't answer when he never said that he was going to do that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he will heal. Well, did he say that he was going to heal? No, but I believe it. Okay, all right. But then when your kid dies, well, God let me down. No, he didn't let you down. You didn't pray about it. You declared it. That did nothing. You could have asked God to heal, and he could have said yes or no, but you weren't asking in faith. You were just demanding something of God. It's the exact same thing here with the demonic, where you just walk into something you don't know what you're talking about and start making demands. So, let's close this up. If an object appears to be haunted, my rule of thumb is just get rid of it. If you've got something in the house and it appears to be haunted, just throw it away. If your house appears to be haunted, try to sanctify that. And so what you do is, first off, make sure you are right with God. Second off, make sure there is nothing in your house that shouldn't be there. And then third off, excuse me. And then third off, pray and try to cast it out. As a last resort, you move, not as a first resort. I see a lot of times people will try to deal with their house being haunted, and they'll bring in somebody else to try and bless their house, and then it doesn't work, so then they try to move. There's other things you can do. In fact, usually you need to get your heart right with God in the first place. So get rid of things or people that are in rebellion under your house. Bring it as a household under the authority of Christ, which means you yourself have to be under the authority of Christ. If your kid is living in sin, and they're doing things like drugs, and you see people do this all the time. Their kids will get into a problem, so they'll try to bail them out of jail and all these different things so they don't have to ever live with the consequences of their actions. And so then their kid will go, and impregnate different people, couch surf, and have kids all over the place, and still they're trying to bail them out of their problems. Like, you do your adult children no favors when you do that kind of stuff. Anyways, moving on. If a person appears to be demonically oppressed or possessed, the rule of thumb is always start with physical ailments. A lot of times there'll be somebody who's either starting a new medication or got off their medication and they're acting a little bit crazy. Okay, people, especially Christians, have been way too rushed to accuse somebody of being demon possessed. In my ministry, I have only encountered 2 people who are demon possessed. 2. All the other times were people with physical problems, a blow to the head or something like that just needed medical attention. That was all that they needed. It wasn't something needed cast out of something. And you have to have the wisdom to know the difference. If a place appears to be haunted that you do not own, like a place around town, hear what I'm saying? Just don't go there. Problem solved. And well, why don't you cast it out? Because here's the thing, it's not under your authority. If you go there and try to cast it out, first off, you're probably going to have the demon attacking you. Second off, even if you do make it out of there without getting hurt, the demon is just going to go right back because it's not under your authority. Whatever brought the demon there in the first place will probably just bring it right back. Demonic is oftentimes in the unsuspecting, though. There's a kids thing nowadays. It's called Italian brain rot. Have you guys ever heard of this? I know you have, but no? Well, if you ever see a picture of it, it's a shark. One of them is a shark with wearing blue shoes on its fins, whatever. And then there's some other ones, too. There's one with orangutan, all kinds of different stuff. Well, it's called Tralalero Tralala. And you would think this is a harmless little stupid kids thing, but if you look up the lyrics to the song, it's actually making fun of God, using some very blasphemous terms against God. It's very satanic. But it sounds very catchy and fun. And I think that we sometimes look too far out there for the demonic when sometimes it's right under our noses. And then the last thing I want to hit before we close out. oftentimes, especially nowadays in the charismatic movement, I see a lot of Christians who go to the other extreme of trying to cast demons out of everything. And this, I think, we need to be careful of. Usually, there's not a demon everywhere. Like, oh, you're having financial problems. There's a demon of some or a spirit of something you have to cast out. This person has a spirit of Jezebel, and all these different things. That doesn't even mean what you think it means. But no, usually it's not those things. Just as a real quick thing, demons cannot possess Christians. Demons can oppress Christians. So there's a difference there. Third off, if you are not a genuine Christian, you can still be possessed, okay? For instance, a Christian that's living in sin that never actually came to the knowledge of Christ. And if you start doing things that open you up to the demonic, you can have more and more demonic activity until you get your life right with God. I already said about casting out without it being sanctified is not going to fix the problem. Casting out without knowledge, you may be biting off more than you can chew. I already mentioned that. Moving on. Okay, if you do not believe the things I said about ghost demons or hauntings, that doesn't really matter. It doesn't make it not true, okay? This is something I experience a lot when I talk to people about these kinds of things. They say, well, that's your view, but I don't know. I don't think that, I think that it's okay for me to do these things. Okay, or they'll say, I just don't really believe that there are really demons out there. I just don't believe. Okay, that's fine. You don't believe whatever you want, but that doesn't make it not true. And just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it's not going to have an effect on your house. You see that happen a lot. We don't have time to talk about that, so I'll skip it. If you start having problems, there is a name that you can that can save. Those who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. So just to kind of conclude a couple of things, are there ghosts? Possibly, but not as you think that there is ghosts. Are there demons? Yes, but once again, not as you probably are thinking. Can something be haunted? Apparently so. What about spells cast? If there's something, a spell that somebody casts, what's going on with that? We'll talk about that when we get to Wicca. And then as far as what the first story was with the woman having the stuff in her house, what I would recommend to that person, first off, get your heart right with God. Are you under the authority of Christ? That's the first thing I'd say. Second off, I'd do a sweep of the house just to make sure. And then the third thing is I would start praying and anointing my own house, not calling in priests and pastors to fix it. I think that this is a great opportunity for her to learn and grow. This other person that asked these things, let's see if I can find it again. Why did I just close it? That was not very smart. There it is. So how does that work? My guess is that, yeah, there is demonic activities that's happening in the house. I would say start praying over your house and anointing it. Sounds like it probably is a haunting. You should probably start taking it seriously and, get your house in order under the name of Jesus. Especially, it seems like the two people are not connected. It sounds like it is demonic activity going in their house. The fact that it's still there after the new people got there tells me that it's probably not something that's in the house. It's probably just a history that's in the house that people need to go and pray and sanctify the house. A good example of this is actually in the book of Leviticus when there's a disease that gets into the walls of the house and how Moses says to take care of it. I think that kind of relates to this. So moving forward to the other things, is this some kind of a time warp? There is no actual evidence for time warps being possible. Not just out of the, scientifically speaking, there's no proof of that. What else? God giving them time to get it together, that is a direct contradiction of what the Bible says. Up to death, and then once you die, that's it. You don't get any more chances. That's not biblical. Stuck between heaven and hell, I think that's called earth. Isn't that? I don't mean that sarcastically, but isn't... They always talk about hell being beneath and heaven being above. That's earth, right? So if I'm understanding what she's saying, then I would say, no, you can't be stuck between heaven and hell. God is the ruler of the living, and he also is in power over the dead. He can kind of make sure they end up where they're supposed to because of something that they need to finish. I would say no. We don't see any biblical warrant for people having to have something unfinished in their life. This comes from that idea that's been going on for about 50 years real strong of people thinking that everybody has a purpose, that one thing that they're called to do. There's no biblical warrant for that anywhere, that somebody has a purpose. Rather, our life has purpose. Everything we do is filled with purpose. So I really don't think that this really has much for it. As far as I'm concerned, it seems like, how does it work? You've got demonic activity going on in your house is what it sounds like to me. I could be wrong, but that's my diagnosis. So the summary of all the things we talked about, hauntings are oftentimes faked, but there is some truth to it. You just have to get past the Hollywood of it. Next week, we're going to look at, I didn't change it on there. We're not having a question and answer night. Next week, we are looking at women in leadership, going through the Bible from the beginning and getting to the end, the whole thing. What does the Bible say about women and being an authority? Any questions about anything we looked at tonight? Go ahead. Oh, he was a Baptist? I'm kidding. But seriously, though, you said that one thing about the house with the nightmares that people were having. The obvious solution to me would be, yeah, I know, or I assumed, I should say, because I didn't know. I assumed. But with that house, it seems to me like the issue was a demonic one, that, yes, there should have been prayer until the nightmares went away. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 And then, as far as the story that you said about the statue, the altar, I would say really it's not that complicated. Don't go looking for trouble. Stay away from it. If you find yourself at something like that, that's different. But if you just go out looking for it, it's like, come on. Like, that was stupid on the account of the leaders. Like, you don't... I tell you, one time we were in Mexico, and there was a witch doctor in the village, and he was very upset that we were doing stuff there. And so he did this sacrifice with a chicken and left the blood sacrifice on the door of the church. And so we had to, we all got up, and the pastor's all serious and stuff. We're like, what's wrong? He's like, I had to clean up a dead chicken this morning. I was like, what's going on, buddy? But yeah, so I mean, it's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, if the demonic attacks you, you are covered. Here's another thing, though. If you are covered from your spirit, demonic can still hurt you physically. I feel like Christians don't understand this a lot, but they can still attack you physically. But anyways, any other questions? No? We're good on that? Go ahead. Right. Right. If you got the Spirit of God inside of you, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? No. One other thing I thought of is that concerning that house with the old dude with the top hat, the ghost. I would say probably don't go trying to talk with it or anything either. Probably should mention that from the get-go.